Hello and welcome to the e-sgol Conference 2022 on Thursday the 7th of July. I'm delighted to introduce Hannah Madgwick of WJEC, who's here to talk about what they have available through their website. If you have any questions you would like to ask during the workshop, please use the question and answer feature on the right-hand side of your screen. Hannah, when you're ready, thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Hannah and I work as part of the WJEC Educational Resources team. It's really great to have this opportunity to share some of our resources with you that we have developed over the last few years to support teaching and learning in your schools. As a qualified teacher, I fully understand the pressures on teachers' time, and I can imagine that those pressures have only become more intense over the past 2 years. And I hope that these resources and some teaching strategies that I'll share with you will help alleviate some of that pressure and reduce planning time for you as well. As some of you will already know, in response to the pandemic, the resources team made a major effort to shift towards developing content that supported distance and blended learning. And we've worked alongside senior examiners and active teachers to develop our blended learning resources. These resources provide a good balance for students in terms of knowledge-based content and also activities that develop essential skills so that students can achieve the best possible outcomes. These resources have enabled our schools and colleges to continue teaching when face-to-face teaching was not possible. But we must remember that blended learning is not just online learning, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So blended learning is a method of teaching that combines active, engaging online learning with active and engaging offline learning. This gives students more flexibility to adapt their learning experience so that they have more control over the time, speed, and the location of their learning. Our blended learning resources are free digital resources and online learning packs that allow students to learn at their own pace. As I've said before, they are written by senior examiners and subject specialists, specifically for WJEC specifications. So where can you find these resources? Well, they can be found either through individual WJEC subject pages, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, or through our resource website, resources.wjec.co.uk. So I'll just take you to that site now. And show you how to navigate this page. It's quite simple and we have all of our resources on this page. Of course, it's going to take 3 days to load. So you just quick search, you can select your subject. So you could be teaching biology, key stage 4. And then when you click through, it comes up with all our resources, blended learning, you've got knowledge organisers. And we also sometimes link out to other sites such as Hub, and I know we've got the e-sgol revision sessions on here as well. So it's a really nice, quick and easy way to navigate through to a page that will give you all the resources you need access to. So I'll just pop back to the PowerPoint. So our blended learning resources are student-centred, open access resources. They're bilingual, they're free, and students can use them to learn anytime and anywhere, making them both flexible for you as teachers and the learners. They're all inclusive and accessible, so blended learning lessons are suitable for those who may need to use screen readers, and the majority of videos we use are hosted by YouTube or educational sites, which offer closed captions on screen, which is really handy for those with sight issues, but also if you just wanted to watch a video without the sound on, if you're in a library or that sort of thing. So the variety of activities engages pupils by combining on-screen interactive elements with more traditional elements such as writing tasks. And they can be used on a variety of electronic devices such as laptops, tablets, iPads, and they're even suitable for mobile phones. I wanted to show you an example of one of our blended learning resources and run you through some of the key features which will hopefully showcase what I've been talking about. Our blended learning resources are quite formulaic, so teachers should find them easy to navigate and so should learners without too much input from you. You can see here on this landing page, you have quick access to each lesson in a particular topic. So as you can see, it says up here, this is GCSE Biology on Response and Regulation. I've used a variety of different subjects throughout these examples, just so you can get a flavour regardless of what subject you're teaching. So if I start with lesson 1, each lesson begins with lesson objectives, and you can see here, even when you enter the lesson, you can skip through to the other lessons and other screens, so you're not limited to clicking next all the time. So each of our activities has a little icon on the side. The pen here symbolises writing and the book reading. There are two most common ones, but all of our activities do have these. On the right hand side here, we have a little light bulb icon. So this will help you to answer any questions in the resource in this particular block. But it's also something that you might not want on screen immediately, but it is there for learners if they need the help. The other useful thing on this page is these highlighted words, which when you hover over them, they give you a definition for what each word means. They're really useful because they can be used in any of the blocks, so you'll see them across all of our activities, and these enable independent learning as they don't require any teacher input to understand any unfamiliar terms. So at the bottom of each page, you'll be able to click through to the next activity. Here you can see we have a video hosted from YouTube, so again, you'll be able to access those closed captions. Most of the videos are embedded, so when you click play, they just play. Some do take you out to other websites, for example, BBC Bitesize. If we've got a video of theirs, it will take you out to the Bitesize website. But you can use closed captions on all of these. At the bottom of this page then, we've got one of our interactive activities. So this is just a true or false activity. I'm not filling this in properly. But when you come to the end, you have this really useful check button. So all of your learners will be able to get immediate feedback. They can see where their knowledge is less secure maybe, and what they'll need to work on in the future. Underneath this then, we've got a simple multiple choice question. So you use the diagram and you see what's A, is it an optic nerve? No, and it feeds back to you what the correct answer is. If I take you then to the next page, here we have a writing task. But what's nice about most of our writing tasks is that they instruct learners to share their work with your teacher for feedback. So this means that learners will be held accountable for the work that they do. They can't just go away and pretend that they've done a lesson. You'll be able to hold them accountable because they should have some evidence of what they've done. Then when you finish a lesson, click finish and it takes you back to the main screen and tells you you have successfully completed the lesson. So there are a couple of other elements I wanted to show you. So I'll click into lesson 2 and I will click reflex actions. So here we've got a fill in the gaps activity. This is quite useful because you can have slightly longer form answers in these. And again, when you check the answers, it will tell you the correct answers underneath. So again, learners can see, oh, well, maybe I'm less secure on this than I thought, and they can go back and do some extra revision. On this screen, we have one of my favourite activities. So we've got this image here, and then this asks you to order that image. So which way does the reflex arc work? And again, you can check your answers and it'll tell you what the correct order was. Finally, a lot of our lessons, in fact, most of them, end with an exam practice question. So these always have a question and a mark scheme available as downloads. Sometimes they're on the same screen as they are here. Sometimes the mark screen will be on the next page, but we always have both, just to enable that independent learning. You can then incorporate these into lessons however you want as teachers. You can either instruct pupils to plan at home and then answer in class in a timed situation if the question is appropriate for that, or you can send them away and they can answer the full question at home and then bring it into class for feedback. So you can see that blended learning activities can be used in a number of ways. It doesn't always have to be prescriptive. One last thing I wanted to show you, which was this extension activity here. So similar to the hint icon, it'll say in the text that there's an extension and you click on it and it offers you extra questions. The great thing about this is that the questions are often slightly more challenging, so they're perfect for your A to A star pupils. You can direct them towards these questions. Often they require slightly longer form answers or maybe some additional research. So they're ideal for those pupils you want to challenge. So I'll take you back to the PowerPoint now. So what are the benefits of blended learning like this? Well, NFER has done a number of research projects into pupils' learning experiences during lockdown and effective blended learning, and there is a clear message in their findings. Pupils are better engaged with learning, which involves interactive content, which helps them consolidate their learning, and particularly among those pupils who are disadvantaged. It highlights the importance of interactive learning that reinforces what pupils know and allows them to self-rule. It's also important to have a varied offering because we know that when it comes to learning and teaching, one size definitely does not fit all. So if we're to make up for the teaching time that's been lost and to incorporate our new teaching practices into the real world classroom, then we need to be thinking about different ways of teaching and using different strategies. So we're going to look at some useful teaching strategies for our blended learning resources. So as you can see on screen, these are some of the strategies I would like to discuss. Obviously, we aren't limited to these, but I think they do work really nicely with our resources. So we have station rotation or lab rotation, outside, inside or flipped learning, and mastery or supplemental learning. So I'm going to go through a few resources now and how they can be used with these strategies. So I'll start with station rotation. This is where the teacher organises their classroom into different stations and students are divided into small learning groups that rotate through the tasks. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but I know it can be quite tricky to set up with enough tasks for each station and it's difficult to manage. So hopefully our blended learning will massively help with that. There's quite a lot of flexibility in how you can use these resources with station rotation. You can mix and match digital with resources you already have, or you can use our blended learning on every station. It really just depends on what you need for your classroom and which resource you're using, but there should be a way that you feel you can incorporate this into your teaching. It also allows you to effectively differentiate by adding additional tasks for those who might finish quickly, or you can differentiate through the amount of support you're giving each group. But everyone can continue their learning then, even without your input. So with this resource, it's GCSE Geography, and I'm going to take you to lesson 2. So lesson 2 in screens 2 to 5. This is, I think, a really great example of how you can use this resource in a station rotation. So each task is quite self-contained. There's videos on some screens, they're just a couple of minutes long, and they lend themselves really nicely to follow-up tasks, which will help consolidate learning. So starting with this one on the water cycle, this is a video which plays in screen, and then it's followed up by some reading to do. Now this is the first one and it doesn't have an interactive task that follows it, but you could add your own task. For example, I think it would be really nice to have your pupil maybe draw the water cycle on a sheet of paper, or they could do it in their books. It depends on how you want to set that up and what again works for your classroom. Now the other screens follow a very similar pattern. These are videos followed up by some reading. Again, you've got that hint button, and then they're followed up with an interactive activity. Now this one again is an ordering activity and they can check it when they're done. So even after they're done, you don't actually need any input. They will know already whether they've understood what they've completed. Similarly with this one, It's a video followed up by a fill in the drop down boxes, and then you can check again at the end when you're done. So if I stop on this one then, this one is a little more challenging. So you've got a small introduction followed by just an image, and then you've got your questions to answer. Now this one could be a little more tricky as there's only such a small introduction before they answer the questions. So this could be where you support a group who you think might struggle making inferences from the image. That's how you get your differentiation in. Now again, this lesson ends with a past paper question. You could incorporate this into the lesson, or you could send them away with a homework task to complete the past paper question. Again, it doesn't have to be prescriptive. You could do this in a number of ways, and you don't even have to complete the past paper question, but it is there if you want to use it. So I will take you back to the PowerPoint, and then we're going to go on to flipped or outside-inside learning. With this, instead of receiving the information in the classroom, learners must collect the information before coming to class, which then releases teaching time that can instead be used to deepen students' knowledge and understanding. I've opted for a religious studies resource here because they tend to be quite content heavy, and some pupils may need a bit more time to read and digest that information. So using this as outside-inside learning is really, really useful for those pupils. So as always, if I begin lesson 1, we start with lesson objectives. So we just set out what's going to happen in this lesson and everyone knows what to expect. So as we move into lesson 1, it's a nice introduction with a little video, and then you follow it up with answering questions. Again, learners know that their learning will be followed up in a classroom situation, so they will be held accountable for what they do at home. On the next screen is where flipped learning really comes into play. It's very content heavy, so there's 2 blocks of reading before they get to an activity. But again, it does have these highlighted words which give you definitions, so they will help with any potentially new or unfamiliar terminology. But then it does end with a simple true or false activity, so pupils will know whether they have properly understood what they have just read or not. Similarly, with the next screen, we have reading and a video. This is followed up by a spot the mistake activity, which again, you choose the word, tells you if you're right or wrong, shows you the correct word, and then you answer in the box what you think the actual correct answer is. So this is really helpful. Again, you get that immediate feedback and pupils should know whether they have successfully understood the content. Now, again, with this screen, it's a very similar thing to the first screen, but the most important thing is that this ends with a speaking and listening activity. This is designed specifically for use in class. The question that's asked summarises all of their learning, and they need to take back to class what they learned, and they know they'll have to discuss it. So it would then be up to teachers to set up a class discussion, if that works for your setting, or it could be that there are additional writing tasks in class which will help solidify learning. It's also worth noting that not all blended learning lessons, which would be suitable for flipped learning, have this as an end task, but it would be quite easy for you to set up a question alongside the relevant blended learning lesson with the introduction that will form all or part of the next lesson. And then obviously you can finish the lesson. Back to the PowerPoint one last time then. Finally, we have supplementary or mastery. Like I said, the great thing about our resources is that they allow students to take control over their learning. And with mastery, it is a case of practice, practice, practice. They can also look at the topic in advance to digest any information and gather any questions they might have. So for this one, we've used a maths resource on construction with compasses. So again, you have the lesson objectives, and then we're into the lesson. So this can be a really difficult lesson to demonstrate in class to all pupils or on a whiteboard. It's quite tricky. So learners can practice doing this at home by following these step-by-step instructions. So that's really useful, but in addition to that, we also have videos demonstrating what those skills they've just learned are. So for those who maybe find it tricky to follow written instructions, it's really useful to have a video demonstrating to you what you need to do. So each page of this resource is very similar, but following slightly different rules that you need to do. When you click through to the end, then you have a knowledge check. So this is where students are encouraged to practice their skills. As I said, practice, practice, practice. So this lesson would allow them to practice their skills outside of class and then maybe refine them in the lesson. Alternatively, they could go back to this lesson when revising and practice their skills again until they feel like they have mastered them. So you can redo this lesson, rewatch the videos as many times as you feel you need to. I'll also just quickly discuss supplementary learning, as it sort of incorporates a lot of things we've already talked about. So this is where students can be pushed forward by studying additional content outside of the normal lesson. So the great thing about this is that students can do it at their own pace in their own time. And again, our blended learning lessons are perfect for this sort of thing. As I mentioned before, the activities with an extension task are absolutely perfect for supplemental learning, particularly at A level, as they tend to link out to longer research tasks, or they require longer form answers. So they're perfect for those students who are hoping to achieve the highest grades. So back to the PowerPoint, and I'll just summarise. The benefits of blended learning are that it gives students more control over their learning. It differentiates consistently and effectively, and it shifts control over the pace and learning to the students themselves. So hopefully what I've done is shown you a few examples of how you can use our blended learning resources in class. I know a lot of you have used them in home learning and distance learning, but this is just a new way of using them in class and taking advantage of our resources. If you find when you're using resources that there's anything you want to feed back to us, like how your learners are using the resources, what's working well, or even what could be improved. Obviously, this was a new project at the start of lockdown, so any improvements of what works well in class and what doesn't would be fantastic for us. And even if you have any suggestions for what we could do in the future, then please do get in touch with resources@wjec.co.uk. We really appreciate anyone who takes the time to get in touch, whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, we are there to support you in your teaching. As was mentioned at the start, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A box. Or if you would like to look at our resources in your own time and have any questions that do arise from this presentation or from anything else, I know it's quite nice to have a face at the end of an email address. Please don't hesitate to contact me on hannah.madgwick@wjec.co.uk. That's all from me this afternoon. I really hope you found this session helpful. If there's any questions, then do let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic evening.